What's up, gamers? It is the first day of reveal season, and they revealed a lot. We got every single legend in the very first set. Now we have full context of all the legends in this set, and we can fully evaluate cards a lot better now. So we're just gonna go through all the legends first, and then everything else afterwards, because we will be here for a moment. So first up, we have Kai'Sa, Daughter of the Void, a Fury Mind legend that says exhaust it as a reaction to add 1 power, and you can only use that to play spells. So at a baseline, this is essentially a ramp ability. Make sure you don't have to spend as many runes in order to play your really high cost spells. So cards that have 1 power cost become a lot better in Kai'Sa specifically. So cards like Get Excited, where you discard a card and deal damage to something in a battlefield, is really good in here, especially with Kai'Sa's champion, Kai'Sa Evolutionary, which is a 6 cost 6 might power 1 blue champion that has ganking, and whenever it conquers, you may play a spell from your trash with energy cost less than your points without paying its energy cost. So with that, cards like Get Excited become really interesting in here, because Get Excited can discard a spell that you could get back with Kai'Sa. Get Excited is also not costing you real power because of your Kai'Sa legend. And then your Kai'Sa champion is able to either reuse the Get Excited itself or reuse whatever you discard off of it. So there's a lot of innate synergy with that. And then lastly is Kai'Sa's signature spell, which is Acathian Rain, which is a 7 cost power 3, and you deal 2 damage to a unit 6 times. And you can choose different targets with them. Acathian Rain is really strong. It allows you to snipe things in the opponent's base, and you get 12 damage that you can shoot anywhere, essentially. Now, it doesn't have action or reaction, so you can't do it during a showdown. You can only do it essentially during your main phase when you're not in combat. And because it's a 7 cost, you will very rarely be able to actually use this off of your champion Kai'Sa effect. But that also means that you can really freely discard this off other discard outlets because you're in Fury, and Fury naturally has multiple discard outlets like Get Excited that we've talked about before. So Acathian Rain can honestly be a really good card in the later stages of the game, or as a huge tempo swing when a bunch of units have taken over the battlefield and you need to conquer at least 1 of them, or you need to conquer 2 of them for your final point. Then Acathian Rain is really good in those spots in blowing up those units because you get essentially 12 damage. So you can either target this on 6 different units, or you can stack them up on just 1 really big unit, or hit like 2 medium-sized units, right? It's a very expensive cost, but if you're able to get it for free off your champion Kai'Sa, then this card is insane. Kai'Sa seems to be a really good champ in both free-for-all and 1v1, because in free-for-all you have more chances in order to conquer for your champion Kai'Sa in order to activate Acathian Rain more often. It can also be really good in tag team, where you need 11 points to win. Then you get access to these really big spells and have a longer time that you can use them over and over again. And unlike cards in, like, let's say Magic, where after you use a card in your grave, they usually exile it afterwards, Champion Kai'Sa does not do that. So once you put 1 spell in, then every time you conquer, you're able to consistently be able to reuse that spell. So I think Kai'Sa at a baseline is really cool. The only potential bad part about it is that it can be really slow, but because you're in Fury, you have access to more aggressive tools that Jinx or Darius could use. So there is a chance you play this as like a tempo style deck where you more aggressively conquer early, so then your champion Kai'Sa will be able to activate your bigger spells faster. I could probably go on and on about it, but we have so many cards to go through, I should stop rambling about Kai'Sa, but Kai'Sa is really cool. Next we have Darius, Hand of Noxus, a Fury and Order legend, and has Exhaust Reaction, Legion, add 1 energy. So you can only use this whenever you've played a card in your hand already, but this has pretty cool implications. But before then, we should go over the rest of the Darius cards before we go more in depth about it. So Darius's champion is Darius Triferian, 5 energy, 1 power, 5 might unit that says whenever you play a second card in a turn, give me +2 might and ready me. And then lastly is his signature spell, Noxian Guillotine. It's a 4 energy, 1 power, has action, and you choose a unit, kill it the next time it takes damage this turn. But if you've activated Legion, you kill it now instead. So Darius is all about Legion-esque effects, where he wants you to play 2 cards in a turn, and you get bonuses off of it. So you utilize your Legend Darius to essentially have 1 more mana each turn. Then you get access to some pretty cool tools, like his Champion, where you can conquer something, play your 2nd card in a turn, and then you ready him at 7 might, and then you go conquer another thing. So because of this, it should be pretty easy to like chain conquer multiple battlefields in a turn, because Darius himself is just a massive unit. But then you also have a really cool tool with Noxian Guillotine. It's interesting. I don't know how good it'll end up being. You still play the Darius for sure. It feels like one of the weaker signature spells that we've seen so far. The cool thing is it is an action, so you can do it during a showdown. And if it ends up being your first card you play in a turn, then you can like send up a 1 might unit and then use the action and then use Noxian Guillotine on the opponent to where the 1 might unit will trade with it. So you essentially traded 4 mana and a 1 might unit to clear out a battlefield, and then you can just easily take it over with any of your big guys. So then you can send up your Champion Darius and then play your 2nd card in a turn, and then ready him, and then go conquer something else. That's a cool play you can do. But you can also battle trick against decks that have really big units. So like Volibear, if you played a unit for that turn and then you go fight Volibear, then Noxian Guillotine can activate and then kill that big unit that Volibear has. Or at worst, if the opponent tries to come fight you, then you can use a reaction on them, and then you can play Noxian Guillotine afterwards. There's a lot of cool implications with Noxian Guillotine. It is pretty expensive, but the potential swings it can do is pretty solid. Darius is also in colors where you can randomly ping for damage within Fury or make a bunch of little dudes off of the order mechanic. So there's a lot of ways you can trigger even the non-Legion part about this. That makes it really interesting. So yeah, overall, very cool card. I'm interested to see if it ends up being like really good or just being like a fine addition as like a top end to this deck. Next up, we have Leona Radiant Dawn, which is an Order and Calm legend. Whenever you stun 1 or more enemy units, buff a friendly unit. So this has 2 new keywords that we haven't seen in the starter decks yet, which is stun and buff. Buffing is kind of like an attachment on something where it gives it +1 might, and you can only have 1 of it on each character. From what we've seen, there are some buff effects where if some cards are buffed, then they have other additional effects that they can give themselves. And then there's also stunning, which means that that unit cannot deal damage for the rest of the turn. So to go along with the Legend Leona, we have her Order Champion, which is 4 energy, 4 might, 1 power. Has whenever I attack, stun an enemy unit here, and also shield. Shield, I believe, was not in the starter decks as well. It's a new mechanic that we see here. So shielding is whenever this character defends, it has +1 might, or however much might it ends up saying, because some will say like shield 2 at some point. Leona's signature spell is Zenith Blade. 3 energy, 2 power, action, stun an enemy unit at a battlefield. You may move a friendly unit to that enemy's battlefield. So it is an action spell, so you can do this during a showdown. So if the opponent tries to come combat you, then you can have the Zenith Blade make their unit unable to deal damage, and then you can add a new unit into that battlefield, making this deck extremely hard to actually deal with. And because we have a buff mechanic through Leona herself, and then we also have stunning mechanics, it actually becomes really hard to actually just break through this. The one thing is Leona's not in body, so the ramping and the really high quality, high cost won't be as frequent in Order and Calm, but instead you get access to the control tools that Calm has already shown it has, with 2 different types of counter spells and other varieties of buff spells. So actually breaking through Leona is going to be a nightmare. But you can also Zenith Blade your champion Leona up, and then you get double stun, you buff something, and you just completely wipe the floor with whatever battle you're in, because most decks aren't going to be putting more than like 2 units on the battlefield, right? A lot of decks tend to that we've seen so far tend to have at most 2, maybe 3 units on one battlefield. So Leona having a ton of ways to really just like shut that down and beat over it is really, really strong. This deck should almost feel like an unstoppable wall. Next up, we have Lee Sin. He is a calm and body legend with pay 1 energy and exhaust him, buff a friendly unit. So this isn't free like Leona, but it is a repeatable effect you can do once every turn, and Lee Sin will probably have multiple cards that will benefit off of being buffed. We have Lee Sin's Champion, which is a 5 energy, 5 might, 1 power, has shield, so +1 might while defending. You can exhaust him to buff him, so he gets +1 might, and he has a passive ability that he can have any number of buffs. So Lee Sin's going to be able to get really, really big, essentially, and you can keep putting buffs on him non-stop. And then you take over one battlefield with him, and it'll become really difficult to actually break through that battlefield now without either your own really big unit or some type of removal effect. Now, on the surface, this doesn't seem as great because there's a lot of effects that we're gonna also go over during this video. But just with the cards we know about right now, Order has a ton of just straight up removal, and there are other cards that deal damage. But remember, this deck is also in Calm, which also has access to ways to either buff Lee Sin more or have access to different types of counter spells in order to counter these removal-esque effects. So I think people might look at this at first and think it's not great, but I think just because of it being in Calm, it gets access to a lot of cool tools that really helps this type of keep one big guy in play strategy. And then lastly is Lee Sin's signature spell, which is Dragon's Rage. 4 energy, 1 power, move an enemy unit, then choose another unit at its destination. They deal damage equal to their mights to each other. So Dragon's Rage is really cool. So really neat thing about this card can either move cards off of battlefields into the base, and then you snipe something off the base, or you can even move something from the base to a battlefield, and then you can snipe them both as well. It really depends on the stats that players have. There is some play around with Dragon's Rage where players can make the board states to where it makes it awkward to try to kick something with matching power into each other. But just the threat of this as well makes playing around Lee Sin a lot harder, because now it's not as easy to just play a really big guy and try to beat over Lee Sin with it, because if you do that, then they can kick that big guy into one of your other guys and then be able to also push your big guy off of the battlefield, so then they can go reconquer it again, which gives this deck an extra tool that it can utilize to deal with some counterplay that could deal with Lee Sin. The big thing is to be really careful about playing around this as well, because if you have both battlefields, but you only have one unit on both and they both have the same might, Dragon's Rage can clear out both of those battlefields and you basically have to restart conquering them, right? Now that could be beneficial if your deck has effects whenever you conquer, but it makes it a lot easier for Lee Sin to try to conquer other spaces. So yeah, Lee Sin is pretty cool just off the reveal so far. Next up is, I believe, the last buff deck, which is Sett, which is Order and Body. Whenever a buffed unit you control would die, you may pay 1 power and exhaust him to spend its buff and recall the exhausted unit instead. And then whenever you conquer, you can ready Sett. So this is very cool. This gives a really fun revive mechanic into seemingly colors that would normally not have this type of effect, and it has some pretty cool implications. So recalling means that you move the unit back to your base. This will exhaust it from Sett itself, but it allows you to really be oddly aggressive with your units. Now, Sett himself doesn't buff anything, so the rest of your deck has to be able to buff each other, but it can make retaking battlefields that you lose a lot easier, because the one rough part whenever you lose a battlefield is that usually your units also die. Sett can prevent that, where you conquer something and then on the next time the opponent conquers back, then whenever it would die, then Sett would be able to save it, and then on your next turn be able to use it again as an attacker to try to reconquer that battlefield. And then whenever you do reconquer it, if you have other buffs as well, then you can use Sett to save one of the units that helped conquer it, and then as you conquer it, then Sett will be able to ready, and then you'll have him ready again on the opponent's turn, which makes removing units from Sett a little bit hard. And that's just off of his legend. We still have 2 other cards from Sett that we need to go over. So we have his Champion, which is a 4 energy 5 might, which is really good rate. Has Tank, so whenever it's being dealt combat damage, then it has to be dealt combat damage first in the battlefield. And then he has +1 might for each friendly buffed unit at this battlefield. And then lastly is Sett's signature spell, which is Showstopper. 1 energy, 1 power signature spell that says buff a friendly unit in your base, then move it to a battlefield. So Showstopper can be really cool with Legend Sett, because now whenever you move something to attack with Sett and then it would normally die, you can use your legend set in order to save that unit. And if it would have been a 1-for-1 trade, then you save your unit, their unit dies, the battlefield's empty. Then you can use Showstopper to take control of it again without needing another unit in play, which allows you to do this with just one unit. Or again, you could trade with a unit on a battlefield, and then you can use this and go after the other battlefield and try to take control of that or trade with it as well. If you take control of it, then you're able to ready your legend set as well. There's really cool intricacies with how Sett can navigate through a battlefield depending on the board state that Showstopper allows, and legend set having a really crazy ability, probably the strongest legend ability that we've seen so far, and really just have ways to break through boards that normally would be very hard to break through. Next up, we have Misfortune Bounty Hunter. Is a body and chaos legend with exhaust, give a unit ganking this turn. So we've already seen both of Misfortune's champions actually through the starter decks, but just to reiterate if you haven't seen them yet, her body one is a 5 energy, 1 power, 5 might with accelerate and ganking. And then the first time she moves each turn, you may ready something else that's exhausted. And then there's her purple one, which is 4 energy, 4 might, and 1 power, where you can play her to an open battlefield, and then friendly units you play can be played to open battlefields. So both of these Misfortunes are actually like really sick. The biggest thing right now is this deck can get to battlefield so quickly. This feels like it's probably going to be a solid aggro slash mid-rangey combo-esque deck where you just constantly just keep slamming things at battlefields, and it makes it really hard for the opponent to want to trade to just keep you from scoring because you have multiple ways in order to get into a battlefield again very fast. The interesting thing with this though is Misfortune's in body, which is the ramp color, and then also in chaos, which chaos makes sense because chaos kind of does like a bunch of really weird shit. So you can like, there's a lot of cards that like move with other units. There's effects that gain abilities whenever you do move them. So chaos has like a lot of mobility inherently built into it, which Misfortune typically likes. But you can also like chain a lot of things together because Misfortune's ability doesn't cost any energy. And with her body champion, then you're able to ready something that's exhausted. You're able to like do some really neat stuff where you move 2 units onto a battlefield, one of them being the champion Misfortune and then the other one being some random unit. You have your champion Misfortune ready your other unit, and then you can use your legend Misfortune in order to give it ganking, and then it can move to a different place. A lot of really neat implications with this. I don't think we have fully enough yet to see how large in scope Misfortune's going to be, because it seems like it's going to be a more like synergistic-esque deck where you want to combo move things around instead of just having like very easy ways to move, right? At a baseline, it seems solid. It's just hard to fully gauge without seeing all the current move effects. We still have Misfortune's signature spell though, which is Bullet Time, which is 1 energy, action, and then you can pay any amount of power to deal that much damage to all enemy units on the battlefield. This card is potentially really crazy. The big thing is that this card's in body, which has extra ramp, so you're able to pretty aggressively like use your power and recycle your runes in order to get this really big. It also can fully empty out a battlefield very easily to where you're able to use all of your aggressive movement abilities in order to move into those battlefields, because Misfortune doesn't really have necessarily strong units that we've seen so far, unless if you're playing the really big stuff that body potentially has. But having this kind of as your top end slash finisher as a way to help close out a game is going to be really cool. The neat thing is it's also an action, so you can do it doing showdowns. So if the opponent tries to contest you on something you already control, then you can use Bullet Time to really just hit them really hard back. This is going to be really good against token decks like Victor and be pretty good into like more aggressive swarmy-esque decks like Jinx as well. It's a really cool signature spell that has a lot of really cool aspects about it. Next we have Ahri, which is Common Mind. So Ahri Nine-Tailed Fox, the legend, says whenever an enemy unit attacks a battlefield you control, you give it -1 might this turn to a minimum of 1 might. So this is just a passive effect that activates on every single unit that tries to combat you. So the whole purpose of this deck is to try to hold bases in order to score that way and make it really hard for the opponent to actually break through. So this is again just really good into decks that swarm the board easily easily, like something like Victor, something like Darius, something like Jinx. Ahri has a really cool mechanic into those, and then is also a little bit rough into the really big stuff, like Lee Sin, where they just throw one big guy at you and then call it that. To really hammer it home, there's also Ahri's green champion, which is 5 energy, 1 power, 4 might. Whenever you hold, you score 1 point. So this means that if this Ahri holds anything, then you score 2 points every time. And because of just how the final point functions, you can get it either through conquering all battlefields in 1 turn or through holding. Any other means of getting that final point is not restricted at all. If you're at 6 points and you are holding with this Ahri and you successfully hold, you win the game, which is really, really cool. So the biggest thing about Ahri is that because it's also in Calm, again, it has access to different counter spells in order to help protect the units on your board, has ways to buff your units, and then through the legend, you have ways to reduce might on units. Ahri at a baseline just seems really good. This seems very obnoxious to actually deal with, especially with her signature spell, Foxfire. It is just 3 energy, has hidden, which you can hide for 1 power, and then you can react with it later on that battlefield, but also has action. So you have the ability to use it as an action during a showdown. But you get to kill any number of units at the battlefield with a total might of 4 or less. This card is really good as well. A removal spell that doesn't cost any power is already just a good rate. It having the flexibility to become a reaction spell is really cool, especially in the colors that Ahri is in. There is potential for a lot of extra hidden effects where you can kind of sneak Foxfire in there if there's any other good ones with Ahri, but also the flexibility of what you can kill is pretty insane. Also, the really cool thing with Foxfire is how well it synergizes with the legend. So because the legend reduces their might whenever they attack you, Foxfire is able to actually just kill more units that way. Because if they try to send like 2-3 might units at you, then they both become 2 might, and then Foxfire can kill both of them. So it actually becomes really difficult to actually just break through this. And because of your legend ability, you really can kill anything 5 might or less, not 4 might or less. So the 5 might range actually hits so many champions that we've seen so far, which makes Foxfire just a really good card, especially in tandem with Ahri herself. We haven't seen that many blue cards just yet. We've seen quite a few green, and green just seems to be like perfectly in line with what Ahri wants to be doing. And then the last legend is Teemo, Swift Scout. I know a lot of people are very excited about Teemo. He is a Mind and Chaos legend that says you may pay 1 energy to hide cards with hidden instead of 1 power. You can also pay 1 energy and exhaust your legend in order to put a Teemo unit you own into your hand from your champion zone or the board. So this is very cool. The one semi-issue with hidden cards is that they cost 1 power to do. So if you try to build a deck fully around hidden cards, then the cost for them can be quite dramatic, because if you try to play too many hidden cards, then you just kind of gimp your runes and your ability to pay for other costs for the rest of the game, unless if you're in some type of ramp deck that's playing these hidden effects. So you'll probably see decks that play like 1, maybe 2 different types of hidden effects. Teemo can just flood its deck with them, because then if you just end up playing mostly just hidden cards, it becomes really annoying for the opponent to try to play around you effectively. Teemo's other ability, though, of being able to bounce Teemos back to hand or add them from your champion zone is really cool, because we've seen one Teemo, but I suspect both of them will end up saying that you can hide them. So then once you hide them and then you flip them over and have a surprise unit on a battlefield, then you're able to bounce them back with your Teemo effect, and then you can secretly put it into another spot, which is really cool and really annoying to deal with. For example, we can look at the champion revealed with him right now, which is Teemo Scout, the Chaos one. It is 2 energy for 1 might and has hidden, but whenever you play this Teemo, it gets +3 might for the turn. So you can flip up this Teemo and it's a 4 might card for a turn for just 1 energy total, and then you can spend another energy to bounce it back to your hand in order to have another 4 might burst later on. Also, adding Teemo from your champion zone to your hand makes it to where whenever you go first on turn 1, if you don't have a 2-drop you want to play, then you can play a 1-drop and then do your legend ability and add the Teemo champion to your hand, so then you can hide it later, which is really solid. And then for Teemo's signature spell, this card is also really crazy. Guerrilla Warfare is 2 energy, 1 power. You return up to 2 cards of hidden from your trash to your hand. You can hide ignoring costs this turn, ignoring all costs. So whenever you play this, then all of a sudden, all the hidden cards in your hand, you can just play down. Flipping a hidden card is just naturally free, so you essentially get so much free stuff out of this. Now, how strong this will end up being will fully depend on how strong the hidden cards themselves are, but at a baseline, there's going going to be forms of interaction, most likely, that these hidden cards are going to be able to do. And they really did a great job at showing how infuriating it is to play against Teemo in League. Because if you ever try to go after Teemo and they just like run through the jungle, then you're probably hitting a field of landmines in the process, which is super obnoxious to deal with. So until there's like a fully solved Teemo list, it's going to be really hard to tell what you're actually fighting against. And even if it's solved, they're going to be playing multiple just good hitting cards that they're going to be able to mess with. So really this deck's strength will fully depend on how good those hitting cards end up being. But just what Teemo's doing is just so naturally annoying to deal with, which is good. They followed his champ design really well. So now we've gone through all of the legends that we've seen so far. These are all of the ones in the first set. There are going to be some in the Proving Grounds, but we haven't seen those yet. There have been some Chinese reveals for them, but I'll cover them once they're revealed officially in English, because I don't want to go off a rough translation potentially. So as for the rest, there are a few additional cards to go over that were also brand new. So for order, we got Solari Chief, which is 5 energy, 4 might, 1 power. Whenever you play Solari Chief, you choose the enemy unit. If it's stunned, kill it, otherwise stun it, which is just a good card. Potential just 4 might body that also kills something or stuns something, so then you can move in and then kill that thing anyway, is just pretty good. You also activate Leona off of this, so you're able to buff something in the process. If there ends up not being that much better top end cards in order as well, Solari Chief could also just become just a good generic card to have in most decks. We have Pack of Wonders, which is a 2 energy gear card. With exhaust, return another friendly gear, unit, or hidden card to its owner's hand. So this is really cool. One, this could be really cool in Teemo, because if you play the hidden card and then you realize you're not going to be able to use that hidden card on your following turn, then you could use this to bounce that back to hand. It can also bounce back gear or units that you ended up flipping up off hidden. You can also bounce gear units that have abilities whenever you play them. So then you can bounce them back to hand and then play them again. This card can also be really cool in 2v2 because it's return another friendly card. So you're able to choose your partner's cards to bounce back to their hand as well, which is why it's worded the way it's worded. So we'll probably see more ways we can utilize this in the future. Just off the dome, there ain't like too much you can do other than like bounce your Teemos that you flip up, or bounce other hidden units that you end up flipping up, or be able to reutilize entering the field effects. Another interesting thing though is that if you have other gear that exhaust themselves, then you can use Pack of Wonders to exhaust itself, bounce that gear back to hand, and then play that gear again, and then you can reuse the exhaust ability. So this will fully depend if there's a gear worth doing that to, because this will essentially just end up being extra copies of that gear. Because if you're wanting to do that, then the gear, you'd already play 3 copies of it. Pack of Wonders would allow you to play upwards to 6 copies of it as well, which is really cool. Then we have Whirlwind. It's a chaos spell that's 4 energy, 1 power. Starting with the next player, each player may return a unit to its owner's hand. So this card is very neat. I think in 1v1, it could be a little awkward, unless if you're playing a deck that struggles into really big stuff. So like potentially Jinx could play this, where Jinx has a ton of entering play effects. So then you use Whirlwind to bounce a really big unit like Volley Bear or something, and the opponent would end up probably bouncing one of the things that say when played, discard a card from your hand. So it's really cool in aspects like that. It could be really cool in another aspect where if you want to bounce your units back into your hand, you can choose your own stuff, and the opponent chooses first, so it gives you the flexibility of what you should do. Because if you want to bounce something on your board and the opponent doesn't know that, then they could end up bouncing that thing anyway, and then you end up bouncing one of their things instead. I don't know, there's a lot of cool stuff with this. This is really, really cool in multiplayer formats. So if there's obviously just like one really problematic guy at the table, you can use Whirlwind in order to have everyone be able to bounce something of theirs off the board. And in a free-for-all format, you can very easily just clear all of the battlefields at once, which is really cool. It's a very interesting politicking tool that you can utilize. At the end of the day, I think this will end up just mostly probably being a side deck card in 1v1 if there isn't enough just direct removal for really big stuff in whatever chaos deck you're playing. Next, we have Cithira of Cloudfield, 2 energy, 1 might body unit that says whenever you play another unit, you buff it. This card's just fine. It buffs itself just for playing the game, but you can keep rebuffing it every turn if you're ending up spending these buffs on other cards like Sett. So this could be a really cool aggressive tool in Sett specifically. I imagine this probably won't see play in Lee Sin or Leona that much, but Sett could probably really like this card as a very aggressive tool to start trading with opposing units very easily. Then there's First Mate, 3 energy, 3 might. Whenever you play me, ready another unit. This could be cool if you're playing some type of combo deck that wants to chain conquer. So you could probably see play with this in Misfortune, where you're playing the body champion. You move her, you ready another unit, then you play First Mate, you ready her, and then you can start chain conquering very easily that way. This could be decent in like Volibear, where you play like, you can very quickly get to 11, 12 runes, and you just play like a really big guy, and then you usually have spare runes you can spend, so you can spend that on First Mate, ready that really big guy, and then move it somewhere instantly, which is really cool. So this is essentially like give Accelerate to another unit, or give a unit the ability to move twice in a turn. So there's really cool applications with this. It might be too niche an application in order to be consistently used, but the ceiling of this card is really insane, depending on the deck you're playing in. So this could definitely see play in at least one of the body decks. I think Misfortune probably ends up playing this. Next is Promising Future. It is a mind card that's 5 energy, 1 power. Each player looks at the top 5 cards of the main deck, chooses one, then cycles the rest. Starting with the next player, each player plays those cards, ignoring energy costs. They must still pay power costs though. So this card's very interesting. I think this card is really cool in free-for-all, where you can end up kind of play a group hug style deck where you're trying to help all the players out. But I think this will end up just really just played in combo decks of some type. It doesn't have the action or reaction, so you can't like put it on the stack during the opponent's turn. So this will either be in combo decks where you're trying to find very specific cards in order to just combo off and just keep going, but also could just be played in really big decks. So this could end up seeing decent play in Kai'Sa, because in Kai'Sa, then you can play this and then you pay the power cost for free because of Kai'Sa's ability. And then you could potentially pull out like a Cathian Rain and only just pay power 3. And whatever the opponent ends up casting, you end up just like beating it anyway through an Cathian Rain, right? But it also helps find any other type of spell that you would want. And then you can keep reusing that spell off your champion Kai'Sa, which is very neat. If you play it in specifically Teemo, because it has access to chaos, you're able to find possession potentially and take over another unit. Victor could find Grand Stratagem off of it and just have more consistent ways in order to try to close out a game through that way. What this will end up doing is just like trying to be played with decks that naturally just play big stuff, or just some type of combo and you're trying to find that combo as quickly as possible, because it also helps the opponent, which is very weird. Now in free for all, very cool card because it makes everyone do it. So you just accelerate everyone's game plan very quickly. The one also cool thing about this is if you can tell through how the opponent's runes are set up that they might be missing a specific color rune to play a really problematic spell this could hit, then that would be an opportune time to play this. Or if them casting a card with even just 1 power would gimp their resources very easily, this could be a cool like high skill card where you could really mess with people's rune lineup if they aren't set up for it, because no one's going to play around this, right? The more I read this card, the more I like it, actually. It has really cool politicking tools. It has a really high skill ceiling with it just because of it not ignoring power costs. So obviously this is going to be bad against like Volibear, right? Where they're able to just easily just recycle this stuff and get all the runes back. But against a deck like Jinx, they would want just a small unit, nothing too impactful, and then you can grab a Cathian Rain and blow up all their shit. So you can do this where it's like a very opportune time for you in order to utilize the power cost of whatever you could get, while also being an inopportune time for the opponent, or you can try to bait them into using that big ass spell. And if they do end up taking that bait, then they could mess up the play for the next turn. There's really cool implications with this. When really good players get a chance to play this card, I'm so excited to see what they do with it. There's really neat stuff about this. Next is Ravenbloom Student. 2 energy, 2 might. Whenever you play a spell, give me +1 might this turn. This is like fine. Just another early game unit that someone can play. This will probably end up seeing play in Ahri of some kind, where Ahri is trying to chain together multiple spells, or not really chain together multiple spells, but more so use them in order to battle trick the opponent a lot. So in Ahri, you can do the Swiftness spell. I forget the exact name of it, where you give 2 might to something and draw a card. If you do it on this is secretly just a 5 might card that way, which could end up either just beating some champions or trading some champions. Like, you can trade up very easily with this card because of these buff effects that Calm could potentially have, or just other colors that might use this, right? This probably won't see play in like Victor. Could see play in Kai'Sa because Kai'Sa wants to play these spells pretty frequently. Teemo probably not. I think it's only like Kai'Sa and Ahri that would potentially play this right now. And I think it's probably best in Ahri, just from what we've seen so far. It could be decent in Kai'Sa as well, because it is an aggressive tool that Kai'Sa would have access to. But I think that most of the Fury cards that Kai'Sa has would end up being better most of them. Next is Blastcone Fae. 2 energy, 2 might, 1 power. Has hidden, and whenever you play me, give a unit -2 might this turn to a minimum of 1. This is neat again in Teemo. Teemo can make full use of this. Instead of it being 2 energy, 1 power, or just 1 power, it's just 1 energy. It's also a unit, so you're able to hide it and then bow trick it out, and it swings upwards to 4 might in your favor, which is really cool. That's a really good rate for 1. This essentially should kind of feel like extra copies of your Teemo champion in that regard. Another neat thing you can do with this is play it in Ahri, and if the opponent has like a really big guy that attacks, so let's say they have a 7 might unit that's attacking you, Ahri will naturally make it a 6 because it's attacking, and then you can have this reduce it down to 4, and then you're able to use Foxfire after that, and then blow up that really big unit for seemingly 3 energy, 1 power. You get to do that, which is pretty sick. Other than that, yeah, I think it will mostly see play in Teemo, and there's a small chance it could see play in Ahri potentially. Next is Whiteflame Protector. 8 energy, 2 power Calm unit that is also 8 might, and whenever you play me, give a unit +8 might this turn. That is neat. So there's really cool things this could do. One, it can make something in Ahri really big to where it takes control of something easier, which is like fine. Could do okay in Leona, where Leona is also in order, so you're able to probably end up making tokens in the process. So you're going to be able to make one of the tokens really big as well. Interesting enough, this could be really funny in Lee Sin. When you play this, give an opponent's unit 8 might, and then you Dragon's Rage kick it into something else. This could be really cool against like Volibear, where Volibear plays a really big thing, but they also have like a small thing in play. Then you buff one of the things and then you kick it. That's a 12 energy, 3 power play though. I don't think that'll end up happening too often. I think this could end up being cool in Yasuo because of Yasuo's champion dealing damage equal to its might to units where it moves to. So if you buff Yasuo up with this, then Yasuo will end up being a 14 might unit and will just one-shot anything it goes across and will be very easy to take over battlefields that way. My thinking is that this doesn't really have a great home right now, but probably will whenever we see some type of green deck that has a more power matters-esque effect. Lee Sin could still end up being that, but we haven't seen enough to showcase that it will be just yet. But this just seems really high costed, but once you do play it, it does kind of swing the game pretty hard. I don't know. To me, this feels like one of the weaker cards we've seen just because of how expensive it is. I'm thinking only Lee Sin has the potential to play it because it's in body and is able to ramp out into it, right? So I don't know. We'll see what ends up happening with Whiteflame Protector. Next is a spell, Sprite Call. 3 energy. Has hidden and action. Play a readied 3 might sprite unit token with temporary. Temporary is a new keyword that says kill it at the beginning of the controller's beginning phase before scoring. So again, this will probably see play in Teemo because it's a hidden effect, but also it naturally having action is really cool. So it makes non-hidden decks also semi-incentivized in order to play this. Teemo will probably play this because this card just seems really good in there. And this is really just like a +3 might battle trick is what this is. What could be really interesting is if you have some type of like Anthem buff effects, then you can have this play that. So like in Victor, you could play this, you hide it, and then you flip it, and then you can Grand Stratagem as well, which can be an at minimum 8 might swing. And that's not even counting units that you also have to have in play if you're hiding this. So it's realistically minimum a 13 might swing that you can do, which is pretty cool. This could also be cool in Kai'Sa, where it's sacrificed at the controller's beginning phase before scoring. So in Kai'Sa, if you could recur this off champion Kai'Sa and then get a sprite that will stay on the field on the opponent's turn, so if they want to conquer that battlefield that it's at, then the opponent has to kill it, even though it's going to end up killing itself on your turn anyway. And if they choose not to kill it, then you don't score off holding it, but it's still an empty battlefield that you can go conquer with your champion Kai'Sa and then be able to use this again and play the sprite again. The more I talk this out, I think this card might actually end up being pretty good in Kai'Sa. Honestly, yeah, the more I talk this out, this card just seems really good in all the mine decks. Like, I kind of wants this because it's a 3 might swing that is pretty good. Also helps dealing with potential single target removal spells. Then you can play this as well without needing a counter spell, which counter spells in this game have notably been kind of costly. This is a way less costed version to deal with hard removal that way. Teemo naturally wants it because it's a hidden deck, and then Kai'Sa can constantly reanimate this. So honestly, this card might end up being really, really good. The more I look at it. It's also just a generic action, so you can always just play this in any deck and just summon a 3 cost from your hand just randomly, which is super cool. Yeah, I really like this card. This might be one of my favorite cards we've talked about so far. Next is Zhonya's Hourglass, a 2 energy calm gear, has hidden. The next time a friendly unit would die, kill this instead, would call that unit exhausted. Zhonya's is really cool. Just off rip, there's quite a few decks that actually want this, where they have like really specific pieces they want to preserve very well. Like Lee Sin wants to preserve the Lee Sin champion, Yasuo wants to preserve the Yasuo champion, Ahri wants to preserve the Ahri champion, and then there's Leona, which is already kind of a nightmare to deal with. I think maybe Leona might be the only thing that doesn't play this, or you play this in Leona and just make it completely impossible to like remove stuff from the board, right? The thing is, it's in calm, so Teemo cannot use this because Teemo's not in these colors. Having essentially Sett's legend ability as a one-time use card can be pretty cool, especially in decks that normally wouldn't have this type of effect, right? My thinking is probably the biggest winner of this would end up being Yasuo really liking this, because you get to preserve Yasuo's champion, so then you're able to move it back there on the next turn and just kill that unit straight up, right? But I think this will end up seeing play in Ahri and Lee Sin from what we've seen so far, unless other just really good cards for them end up coming out. But this also just seems like a good card to have just in general. Next up is another calm gear, which is Spirit's Refuge. Interesting they made this because it's one of Shen's abilities. We'll see what they end up doing for his signature spell, but it's 2 energy, 1 power. It is a gear that says whenever you play this, buff a friendly unit, and then friendly buffed units have deflect if they didn't already. So this is just a slam dunk addition to Lee Sin. This could be really cool in Ahri and Yasuo as well, because again, they want to protect their champions. So being able to buff them and also give them deflect off of this is really good. I think this will probably end up being very strong in Yasuo specifically, since it turns your champion Yasuo into a 7 might card, and then also has deflect, making it harder to just straight up remove from the game, right? This seems fine in Ahri, seems okay in there. This will probably end up being pretty decent in Leona as well, because I'm sure Leona could overlap with Sett's buff spending mechanic a little bit, but also just give all your buff units deflect is just really good. This might be one of the strongest cards we've seen, unironically. This is just a good card in every single deck that could play it, and just makes it a lot harder to deal with their game plans. Then we have Stand United, another Shen ability, but no Shen. Has 3 energy, has hidden and action, and you buff a friendly unit, buffs give an additional +1 might to friendly units this turn. So this, another slam dunk card in Lee Sin specifically, because combined with Champion Lee Sin, then you're able to, you give each of your buffs basically double the effect, right? So if you end up having like 3 buffs on your champion Lee Sin, then you activate this, you put a 4th one on it, and then they double how much they're giving. So you essentially are giving 8 might back. This is the type of card that I like over the Whiteflame Protector for Lee Sin, because this actively buffs the unit and then also scales very well with just naturally buffing. If Lee Sin ends up going a more go wide buff strategy, then this is still very good in there. This could end up being like a Grand Stratagem-esque effect in there for potentially just 1 power, which is just really good. Very strong combat trick that Lee Sin has access to. Probably won't see as much play in Ahri or Yasuo. It could see some play in Leona, since Leona naturally will be buffing units every time you stun something. So this could also just be like a win condition that Leona has as well. And now finally, our last card, which is Charm. Charm is very simple. It's a calm card that's 1 energy, 1 power, and all it says is move an enemy unit. This effect is crazy. Move an enemy unit, 4 words, so strong. So what can this do? If you have already conquered a battlefield and the opponent has just like something weaker than you that you want to just remove off the board, this can be a removal spell. This could be a removal spell for something like Lee Sin, where they're making really big things, something like Leona, which makes really big things, or you can move a unit there and then you can stun it in the process as well, making it just impossible for them to actually counteract what you're doing. There's also Ahri playing it, which whenever you move them up, then since they moved, they're the ones attacking, which triggers Ahri Legend's ability, which reduces their might, which is really good. This can also be an easy way to score points because you're able to just remove units off battlefields, which is really cool. So you remove the unit off the battlefield and then you just go conquer that battlefield, get an easy point. So this can be really good in late game scenarios where the opponent has just one unit defending. Then you use Charm, move that unit off, and you've already scored off the other battlefield. You go score that battlefield, you win the game. Something really funny this can do is in free-for-all, you can move enemy units to other enemies' battlefields. You can mess with the opponent's board state very well with this, which is pretty cool. You force enemy units to fight, and then you're able to just reduce the resources in the process, because I'm sure neither of those players are gonna want to fight. Or if it's in a late game scenario where you try to force another player to fight them, then both those players are incentivized to try to defend themselves, so they spend the resources trying to win that battle, and then after that, whoever won, you go fight them, which is really cool. Really insane applications with this for just 1 energy, 1 power. And I am so happy this card is a common, so it'll end up being cheap, because I think this card could end up being a staple in a lot of different con decks from now and for years to come. And that is finally it for all of these reveals. I have been yapping for an hour 30. I don't know how long the final video will end up being, but a lot of really cool cards revealed today. Now that we have all these legends revealed, we have way better context of how good cards will end up being. We still don't know quite fully like what champions fully are going to be doing, because some of them are more synergistic in nature with what they're trying to do. So stuff like Sett and Teemo, we don't fully know what they're doing. Kai'Sa just gets better the more spells they reveal for Mind and Fury. Misfortune is just naturally just all about comboing movement from the looks of it. So we're not fully knowing what we're doing with that just yet. But overall, basically all the cards we talked about today have application, which is really important, because sometimes there's cards that come out, they do nothing, even in first sets. And there's a lot of already just interesting decisions with all of it. Like, my primary thing is I love deck building. The gameplay part, whatever. Deck building is the very fun part for me in a lot of TCGs. And I feel like I have so much to work with already, just with not even like a fourth of the set revealed, which is crazy. But yeah, that's all. Tune back in Wednesday when we see more reveals. I'm sure we're going to be seeing a bit less than what we saw today. So hopefully the video will be a lot less intensive, and I'll probably be able to have more time in order to actually like edit them instead of trying to edit what all these cards are doing in this video specifically. So yeah, anyway, thank you all for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. I'll see you guys in the next one.